Typically, when we're talking about the bishops getting super political, we're often talking about the U.S. bishops who have, since the presidential election of last year, but especially it seems since the new president took office and began cutting spending, especially on things like foreign aid, and most especially with things like USAID and its subsidiaries like Catholic Charities and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Typically, when we're talking about bishops getting political, it's the American bishops, for all the reasons I just said. They have been married at the hip to the U.S. government, and that's been the case for some time, as I described in a live stream 6 months ago or so, that when you look at the history of direct U.S. government funding to the bishops, it's gone on since at least World War II, and actually, some indications are even a little before that. Typically, we're talking about the U.S. bishops, but there's another group of bishops that always come to mind with politics, and that is, of course, the German bishops. And the U.S. bishops and the German bishops have one thing in common. They are both fighting on the issue of immigration, and both of them are fighting against a phantom foe. That phantom foe is nationalism. Now, in the American context, and the German context, the word nationalism tends to mean a little different things. Germany, as you might expect, has we'll call it a pretty shaky history with nationalism. They have a sort of a cultural issue with it that goes back about, 80 years. They had some pretty rough experiences with distorted and misused nationalism. In the US, the word has a completely different meaning. It practically is the same or synonymous with the word patriotism. This idea of putting your country first, that you are to have a love of your country, and that politicians and voters and things should make their decisions based on what's good for the country, as opposed to what's good for other places far away and for people who have no real connection to the country. Now, that does not mean you can't help others. Certainly Christians, even very conservative, very nationalist Christians, will say, yes, we might have a duty to help the most vulnerable in other places. In fact, you could make even a nationalist argument for doing such things. But in Germany, it's a little different. And the German experience lately has been that in the eyes of Americans, a moderate center-right political party has suddenly, for the first time in several decades, gained quite a large following among the voting population of Germany. Again, center-right, but in German politics, that's pretty hard right. These guys look like rhinos by comparison, but they have a very hardcore take on immigration, which if you know anything about what's going on in Europe, you understand why they do, to the point where the state there has attempted to ban some of their candidates from running for office, and the bishops of Germany, yes, the same heretical bishops of Germany, want to toss the Catholic faith out in order to make the church more inclusive and open to the wisdom of the world and to adopt its moral standards. They had some pretty hardcore things to say about this going up into the last election, and the German population did not listen to any of that because they gave that center-right party their support. That form a coalition government, but they gave them their support. It was fascinating to watch from across the pond, as they say. But I wanted to show you this because we have a German cardinal, one of the most infamous ones of all of them, telling you that you as a Catholic can't be a nationalist. That's weird. I've done extensive research on Catholic social teaching, and I can tell you that Thomas Aquinas would tell you that that's not necessarily true. Aquinas will tell you, if you read Aquinas, which is not for everybody, but if you read him, you will see that you are to have a filial love for your country. And it's right and just to have a filial love for your country ahead of other places. It has a lot to do with your love of your parents and all the rest of it. It's in that same order of duty. Weird, I know. Love of neighbor extends eventually to love of your country. And I should not get in the way of your faith. But Aquinas would generally disagree with what Cardinal Reinhard Marx has to say. So we go here to cath.net, which is sort of like a milder version of what LifeSite used to be like from Germany and Austria, with the headline, Munich Cardinal Marx cannot be a Catholic and hate others at the same time. And generally, I would agree. But you notice what he's doing there. he is making the word hate synonymous with nationalism. In the German context, you can see how somebody would make that mistake. But in the reality of human history, it's not the same. It's just that order amoris, that order of love. You're to love your family and your neighbors before you're to love others. And it goes on that way in a form of subsidiarity. And these days, even the Pope says, no, we're going to toss out that order amoris and that subsidiarity thing, because being directed from Rome is a coordinated pushback against any resistance to the migration program of our secular rulers. And that's not a popular thing to say these days, not a nice thing to say, but it is the truth. So we go here to hear the words of wisdom from one Reinhard Cardinal Marx, the main mind behind Amoris Laetitia. Quote, Cardinal Reinhard Marx has made it clear that the international Catholic community is a sign of hope and peace against nationalism, hatred, violence, and polarization in society. You cannot be a Catholic and a nationalist at the same time. You cannot be a Catholic and hate others. You cannot be a Catholic and divide societies. That is not possible. In his homily at the closing service of the 45th International Children's and Youth Choir Festival 2025 at the Prix Cantores on Sunday, July 20th at Marienplatz in Munich, the Archbishop of Munich of Friesing declared, "We are pilgrims of hope. That is the message of the Catholic Church everywhere in the world. We are international." End quote. Kind of an odd place to make that declaration, isn't it? Weird. Shows a children's choir to give your political program. Okay, again, odd choice, not one I would have made, but again, the modernists never pass up an opportunity to get political. And, one of the things I've noticed is unsuspecting audiences are really tired of politics. I say unsuspecting because if you tune into the nightly news or a show like this one, you do expect politics. Whether it's church politics, secular politics, whatever. But maybe if you're going to a children's choir, you're not expecting that to be taken over by some activist, even if they're an activist with a mitre. And that's what happens all the time right now, and people are really tired of it. And I'd imagine that's the same not just in the US, but in Germany. Maybe he should keep that in mind, because when they take these events over for politics, they make their audiences hostile to their message. Should be giving our adversaries in things advice, but here we go. So we go back to this for some context. The festival in Munich, said Marx, showed that people from different countries, cultures, and languages can celebrate together in the heart of society. We set up a table in the middle of the city and invite everyone to join us. We can see that there is no emptiness at the heart of the Christian faith. It's not a theory, but a celebration, an encounter, a shared meal. That is the core of our faith. Everything else comes afterward. There's no celebration without music, the Cardinal emphasized. Everyone meets on an equal footing, sings together, listens to one another, doesn't talk over one another. Marx pointed out that the church is called to be an instrument and tool for all people to unite. The 5 days in Munich had shown that this is possible, even among very different people from all over the world. The message is important in these times, end quote. And he gave you there the synodal kind of answer to these things. But you notice he called our worship a shared meal. There's a whole lot going there, and it's worth reminding ourselves that Cardinal Reinhard Marx is one of the biggest proponents in Europe for allowing Protestants to receive the Eucharist at Mass. No offense to the Protestants watching. I know there's a few of you. But unless we have shared belief and submission to what the Eucharist is and the Church's teaching on it and everything connected to it, shared communion isn't possible. It's not. We disagree on Jesus being truly present in the most blessed sacrament of the altar. Then there's not much hope for shared literal communion on this, as well as on a host of other issues. And there are plenty of Protestants who respect us for taking the Eucharist that seriously. I wish Cardinal Marx would take the Eucharist that seriously as well. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Or do you think he's off base when it comes to nationalism and that stuff? Do you think I'm off base? Again, I'm not defending jingoism, this idea that my government is right or even when it's wrong stuff. Clearly, I'm not defending that. But Aquinas and the Church have constantly told us that you have a filial duty to love your country. That doesn't mean engaging in its errors when it's doing stupid things and evil things. But in fact, love for your country means you're going to correct your country when it's doing wrong things. But Marx here has got an axe to grind, and it's all related again to that same thing the U.S. bishops have been all wrapped up in since January, at least, if not going back to November. But I'm curious what you think about this, so let me know in the comments, please. Hey, like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps too. If you ever thought about supporting the work we do here at Return to Tradition, Subscribe Star, Patreon, the Subscribe Plus button is the old join button. All those options were asked for by viewers of this channel like yourself. It does help keep these daily messages coming and is greatly appreciated. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine.